Across the pond, cutting through the noise, this is Unraveling the Truth, with your hosts Charles Fairfax and Peter Pemberton. Welcome to episode 15. Today, Peter and I are doing something a bit different. We're going back to basics, the tools of the trade, so to speak. Because before you can spot a lie, you must first understand how arguments are twisted.
Quite right, Charles. We live in an age of information warfare. Every day, we're bombarded with claims designed to appeal not to our reason, but to our emotions, our prejudices, and our lazy assumptions. The most effective weapon in the deceiver's arsenal isn't some complex conspiracy theory. It's the humble, logical fallacy.
Today, we're going to arm you with the knowledge to spot these rhetorical traps. We'll define them, explain them, and give you real-world examples you'll recognize from your daily scroll through social media or your evening news broadcast.
So sharpen your pencils, open your minds, and prepare to think a little more clearly. This is Unraveling the Truth, the art of the fallacy.
Let's begin with the big one, the classic, the one that makes up perhaps half of all political discourse, the straw man.
The straw man fallacy occurs when someone misrepresents their opponent's argument in a weakened or exaggerated form, then attacks that distorted version rather than the actual position. It's called a straw man because knocking down a straw dummy is far easier than fighting a real opponent.
Here's a textbook example. Imagine someone says, "I think we should reduce military spending and redirect those funds to infrastructure and healthcare." A straw man response would be, "So you want to leave our country defenseless and let our enemies walk all over us? You hate our troops."
Notice what happened there. The original position was about reallocation and prioritization. The response turned it into an extreme, indefensible position, leaving the country defenseless, which is far easier to attack. The real argument never got addressed.
This is rampant in political debates. If you say, "I'm concerned about illegal immigration and its impact on public services," a straw man response might be, "So you're a racist who wants to deport every brown person." It shuts down conversation rather than engaging with it.
The antidote to the straw man is simple. Steel man your opponent's argument. State their position in its strongest, most charitable form before you critique it. If you can't do that, you're probably arguing against a ghost.
Next up, the ad hominem, Latin for to the person. This is when someone attacks the character, motives, or attributes of the person making the argument, rather than the argument itself.
A classic example? Why should we listen to your views on tax policy? You drive a luxury car. Or, he's a convicted fraudster, so nothing he says about economics can be trusted. The character attack may be true, but it doesn't address the validity of the argument.
Now, context matters. If someone's credibility is directly relevant, for example, a witness in a trial, attacking their character might be legitimate. But in most debates, it's a cheap way to avoid engaging with the substance.
The real world is full of this. When a politician proposes a policy, the response is often, "Well, he's a hypocrite because he did X 10 years ago," rather than, "That policy won't work because of Y." It's a distraction, plain and simple.
The best response to an ad hominem is to calmly redirect. "You may disagree with my character, but let's focus on the argument itself. What specifically is wrong with my proposal?" Number 3, the false dilemma, also known as the false dichotomy. This presents only two options when more exist, forcing a choice between extremes.
You're either with us or against us. If you don't support this bill, you support crime. Either we cut all social programs or we go bankrupt. These are all false dilemmas. They artificially narrow the range of possible solutions.
A concrete example. During the pandemic, the debate was framed as either we lock down completely or we let the virus run rampant. In reality, there were many nuanced approaches: targeted restrictions, voluntary measures, improved ventilation, mask mandates, and so on. But the false dilemma prevented a rational discussion of trade-offs.
The way to spot this is to ask, are there really only two options here? What about a middle ground? What about combining elements of both? Often, the false dilemma is deployed precisely to prevent you from considering a more sensible third way.
Fallacy number 4, the slippery slope. This argues that a relatively small first step will inevitably lead to a chain of events, culminating in some dramatic, usually negative outcome.
If we allow same-sex marriage, next people will want to marry their pets. If we legalize cannabis, soon everyone will be on heroin. If we restrict hate speech, The government will ban all political dissent.
The problem is that these claims are rarely supported by evidence. They assume a causal chain that may not exist. The key question is, what's the actual mechanism that would force one step to lead to the next? If there's a reasonable stopping point, the slope isn't as slippery as claimed.
A better approach is to evaluate each step on its own merits. Legalizing cannabis doesn't logically lead to legalizing heroin, because societies can draw distinctions between substances based on harm, addiction potential, and social impact. The slippery slope often relies on fear rather than reason.
Fallacy number 5. Appeal to authority. This occurs when someone claims a proposition is true simply because an authority figure says so, without considering whether that authority is actually knowledgeable on the subject.
A famous actor says this vaccine is dangerous, so it must be. My doctor says this diet works, so it's the only correct one. This Nobel laureate in physics says the economy will collapse, so it will.
The key nuance. Appeals to authority can be valid when the authority is genuinely expert in the relevant field, and there's consensus among experts. But when an authority speaks outside their domain, or when a single expert contradicts the consensus, it becomes a fallacy.
The real-world example that drives me mad. Scientists say climate change is a hoax, citing one meteorologist who's actually a talk show host. Or, this celebrity endorses this political candidate, so you should too. Celebrities may be talented at acting, but that doesn't make them experts in geopolitics.
Always ask, what is this person's expertise? Is it relevant to the claim? And what does the broader evidence say? One authority does not make a truth. Fallacy number 6. The bandwagon fallacy. Argumentum ad populum. The claim that something is true or good simply because many people believe it or do it.
Everyone knows that. Millions of people can't be wrong. This product is the most popular, so it must be the best. These are appeals to popularity, not to evidence.
History is filled with examples of popular beliefs being completely wrong. Everyone once knew the earth was flat. Everyone once knew that bleeding patients cured illness. Everyone once knew that smoking was healthy.
The key insight: popularity is not a reliable indicator of truth. Truth is determined by evidence, logic, and reality, not by a show of hands. When someone says everyone agrees, be suspicious. They're often trying to pressure you into conformity rather than convince you through reason.
Fallacy number 7. The red herring. This is when someone introduces an irrelevant point into an argument to divert attention from the main issue.
You say we need to address the budget deficit, but what about the homeless crisis? Why don't you care about them? This changes the subject rather than addressing the original point. The homeless crisis is important, but it doesn't negate the budget deficit problem.
Red herrings are common in political debates and press conferences. A politician is asked about a scandal, and they respond by talking about economic growth. A journalist asks about policy failures, and the response is about the opponent's personal flaws.
The way to handle this is to politely redirect. That's an important issue, and we can discuss it another time. But right now, I'd like to return to the original question.
Fallacy number 8. The false cause. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Latin for after this, therefore because of this. This assumes that because one event followed another, the first caused the second.
I wore my lucky socks, and my team won. The socks caused the victory. The stock market went up after the election, so the new president caused the boom. I got sick after visiting that restaurant, so the food there made me ill.
The problem is that correlation does not equal causation. Two events may be coincidental, or a third factor may cause both. The stock market might have gone up for reasons unrelated to the election: interest rates, global trends, corporate earnings.
The best way to evaluate causal claims is to ask, is there a plausible mechanism? Is there evidence of causation beyond mere timing? Could there be alternative explanations? If you can't answer those questions, you're probably committing the false cause fallacy.
Our final fallacy for today, the tu quoque, you too. This is a form of ad hominem where someone deflects criticism by accusing the critic of the same fault.
You say I shouldn't lie, but you lied last week. You criticize my environmental record, but you drive a petrol car. You're a hypocrite, so your argument is invalid.
The problem is that someone's hypocrisy doesn't make their argument false. A smoker can still correctly say that smoking is harmful. A politician who has taken donations can still correctly argue for campaign finance reform. The argument stands or falls on its own merits.
The proper response is to address the original criticism rather than deflect. Yes, I've made mistakes in the past, but let's focus on the current issue. Is my argument correct or not?
And there we have it, 8 of the most common logical fallacies used to mislead, misdirect, and manipulate. Straw man, ad hominem, false dilemma, slippery slope, appeal to authority, bandwagon, red herring, false cause, and tu quoque.
The next time you're in a debate, or scrolling through your feed, or watching a politician speak, keep these in mind. Ask yourself, is this a legitimate argument, or am I being played for a fool?
Because the truth is out there, but it's buried under a mountain of bad reasoning. It's our job to dig it up.
Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and keep unraveling the truth.